A couple of minutes left in President Obama's speech from Fairfax, Virginia, which you can see at cspan.org. We're going live now to the U.S. Senate, back from recess from a cybersecurity briefing. Senator Ben Cardin is speaking about amendments to the Stock Act.
Equality and service to this country. In my career, I've spoken on the Senate floor, at events in Maryland, in meetings with constituents and with my colleagues about Harriet Tubman's legacy. While I hope each opportunity I've taken to discuss the life of this remarkable woman helps raise the awareness about her importance to the history of our great nation, my ultimate goal is to properly commemorate her life and her work by establishing the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park on the eastern shore of Maryland, and in working with my colleagues from New York to establish the Harriet Tubman National Historic Park in Auburn, New York. A year ago this week, I reintroduced the Harriet Tubman National Historic Park and the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park Act with Senators Schumer, Mikulski, and Gillibrand as original co-sponsors. I'm happy to say that since that time, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee held a positive hearing on the bill, and the Energy Committee favorably reported the bill, and it has been placed on the Senate calendar. I thank my colleagues on the committee for their support, particularly Chairman Bigeman and Ranking Member Murkowski, and the Chairman of the National Park Subcommittee, Senator Udall of Colorado. The establishment of the Harriet Tubman Historical Parks has been years in the making and is long overdue. The mission of the National Park Service has evolved over time from preserving our natural wonders across the United States for recreational purposes to commemorating unique places of significance to historical events and extraordinary Americans that have shaped our nation. The woman who is known to us as Harriet Tubman was born in approximately 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, and given the name Armina Minnie Ross. She spent nearly 30 years of her life in slavery on Maryland's eastern shore. She worked on a number of different plantations on Maryland's eastern shore, and as a teenager, she was trained to be a seamstress. As an adult, she took the first name Harriet, and when she was 25 years old, married John Tubman. In her late 20s, Harriet Tubman escaped from slavery in 1849. She fled in the dead of night, navigating the maze of tidal streams and wetlands that to this day compromise the eastern shore landscape. She did this alone, exercising incredible courage and strength. Not satisfied with attaining her own freedom, she returned repeatedly for more than 10 years to the places of her enslavement in Dorchester and Caroline counties, where under the most adverse conditions she led away many family members and other slaves to freedom in the northeastern United States. She helped develop a complex network of safe houses and recruited abolitionist sympathizers residing along secret routes connecting the southern slave states and the northern free states. No one knows exactly how many people she led to freedom or the number of trips between the north and south she led, but the legend of her work was an inspiration to a multitude of slaves seeking freedom and to abolitionists fighting to end slavery. Tubman became known as the Moses of her people by African Americans and white abolitionists alike. She is the most famous, the most important conductor of the network of resistance known as the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, Tubman served the Union forces as a spy, a scout, and a nurse. She served in Virginia, Florida, and South Carolina. She is credited with leading slaves from those slave states to freedom during those years as well. Following the Civil War and the emancipation of all black slaves, Tubman settled in Auburn, New York. There she was active in the women's suffrage movement, and she also established one of the first incorporated African-American homes for the aged to care for the elderly. In 1903, she bequeathed the Tubman home to the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Auburn, where it stands to this day. Harriet Tubman died in Auburn in 1913, and she is buried in the Fort Hill Cemetery. Fortunately, many of the structures and landmarks in New York remain intact and in relatively good condition. Only recently has the Park Service begun establishing units dedicated to the lives of African Americans. Places like Booker T. Washington National Monument on the campus of Tuskegee University in Alabama, the George Washington Carver National Monument in Missouri, the Buffalo Soldiers at Guadalupe Mountain National Park, the National Historical Trail commemorating the March for Voting Rights from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, and most recently the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in the National Mall. These are all important monuments and places of historical significance to help tell the story of the African American experience. As the National Park Service continues its important work to recognize and preserve African American history by providing greater public access and information about the places and people that have shaped the African American experience, there are very few units dedicated to the lives of African American women, and there's no National Historical Park commemorating African American women. I cannot think of a more fitting hero than Harriet Tubman to be the first African American woman to be memorialized with a National Historical Park that tells her story and her fight against institutions of slavery and the work on the Underground Railroad. I hope that my colleagues will support my effort to honor Harriet Tubman and support the passage of my bill to authorize the creation of the Tubman National Historic Parks in New York and Maryland. Let me just point out that the landscape in which she lived in exists today, and that will be an incredible part of a national park that can tell the story, particularly to young people, about the courage of this extraordinary woman. The structures exist in Auburn, New York, which complement her life as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, as well as her later life in helping advance the rights of all people. It's an incredible opportunity for us to honor her with this national park and to help future generations understand the history of America and the courage of this extraordinary leader and hero of our nation, Harriet Tubman. Mr. President, I would ask that my entire statement be made part of the record, and I would yield the floor.
Without objection, the Senator's entire statement will be made a part of the record, and the distinguished senior senator from Rhode Island is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today to join with you, my colleague and friend from Rhode Island, to pay tribute to former Rhode Island Governor J. Joseph Garrahy, who passed away last week at the age of 81. Joe Garrahy loved Rhode Island, and in turn, the people of Rhode Island loved Joe Garrahy. His intelligence, his instinct, his integrity led our state with compassion and courage. He believed in the people of Rhode Island and in the virtue of public service. More than 3 decades after he left public office, Joe Garrahy remains one of our most respected and beloved leaders. A man of the people, the governor of Rhode Island, Joe Garrahy, is a Rhode Island icon who will be held in high esteem for generations to come. Rhode Island has lost a friend. We all lost a good friend. He was born in humble circumstances in Providence, Rhode Island on November 26, 1930, the son of Irish immigrants. He graduated from LaSalle Academy in Providence and attended the University of Buffalo and the University of Rhode Island. The governor began his political career in 1962 when he was elected to represent Smith Hill in the Rhode Island General Assembly. He served as Rhode Island's lieutenant governor from 1969 to 1976, and then was elected governor and served from 1977 to 1985. After his retirement from public life, Governor Garrahy was a business consultant who championed new economic development projects and helped existing businesses that have always been the backbone of our Rhode Island economy. He never stopped looking for and finding new ways to promote his beloved state of Rhode Island. As governor, Joe Garrahy had vision, initiative, and incredible strong work ethic. He possessed the unique ability to bring people together to address the needs at the most basic level, while at the same time tackling the most pressing public policy issues of his time. He was also particularly gifted in bringing together opposing sides, inviting diverse interests in the room to discuss issues and matters of conflict. And because of his integrity, his decency, his sincerity, he was more than an honest broker. He was someone that people trusted. His leadership, his example, led Rhode Island with such distinction. He brought people together because they innately trusted this kind and wise gentleman. And they knew that he always had the interest of the state at heart, not his personal ambition, not his personal progress, but the welfare of the people of Rhode Island. His list of achievements is long His many good works have made a lasting impression on our state. He believed that government could and must do all it can to improve the lives of its citizens. He was elected governor after the Navy had decided to close Quonset Point, which is a premier naval air station in Rhode Island, a major employer, a major source of economic activity, and reduce its presence in Newport, a shock to the economy of Rhode Island. In spite of double-digit unemployment and a challenging economy contributed to by this departure, he set a new course to redirect resources and make government work for the people. He fought for the rights of the disabled and led in the deinstitutionalization of the mentally handicapped citizens of Rhode Island. He closed the Ladd School, which is our residential center, and he ended the practice literally of warehousing the disabled at the Institute of Mental Health. He reformed Rhode Island's prison system, which was plagued with unrest and violence, transforming it to a national model. And following the energy crisis in the 1970s, the governor provided resources to a much-needed energy office to look for innovative ways to deal with a still pressing problem to the state and to the nation. He also forged creative partnerships with neighboring states throughout the Northeast and with leaders in Canada. Governor Garrahy was a man of great passion and great decency and had a special affection for the elderly and for the children of Rhode Island. And under his tenure, he created the Departments of Elderly Affairs and Children, Youth, and Families so that he could focus the attention of the state, make the delivery of services to the seniors and to the children more efficient and more effective. And that was Joe Garrahy, thinking not about himself, but particularly thinking about the most vulnerable people in our society. He was always a great cheerleader for Rhode Island. He led the way for the Rhode Island Heritage Commission to flourish, to publicize and popularize our state's unique contribution to American history, its rich cultural heritage, its rich ethnic heritage, which he was awfully proud of. And he was always a staunch supporter of our tourism industry. He also had a profound respect and regard for the environment and worked diligently to clean up pollution in Narragansett Bay and preserve our open spaces. He had helped establish the Narragansett Bay Commission, which is one of the leading agencies in the state to treat our waste products and to make sure that they're not discarded, untreated into the bay. In fact, his efforts with foresight years ago paved the way to one of the largest projects ever completed in the state of Rhode Island, where we now prevent sewage from flowing into our bay unabated. But this was just one of the extraordinary commitments he made to our environment. He was always looking to bring businesses to Rhode Island, high-tech businesses, businesses that would provide people the chance for employment, the chance to own a home, the chance to provide for a better life for their children. He worked to revitalize, particularly the downtown Providence area, through his work with the Capitol Center Commission, which did landmark work in literally reshaping the face of Providence, making it one of the most attractive and most compelling cities in our country. Throughout his administration, he always worked for public transportation facilities, everything that would complement our economic growth. He did it with great passion, great diligence, and again, and again, and again, extraordinary decency. In his final days of office, he launched the Greenhouse Compact, which was a bold economic revitalization plan. He proposed to create 60,000 high-paying jobs, lay the foundation to combat the dying manufacturing industries of the state of Rhode Island at that time. And although the compact was not approved by the voters, there were concerns about who would pay for it, how it would be paid for. Many of its proposals have come to fruition, a tribute, again, to his foresight, to his vision, to his courageous leadership, and his confidence that bringing these issues to the people would eventually lead to their adoption, and they have. Joe Garrahy was the person you wanted leading you in difficult times. And there was no more difficult time than in 1978 when the great blizzard descended upon Rhode Island. Literally, Rhode Island was paralyzed. You couldn't move. People were without communication, without electricity. But there was one constant beacon of hope and stability and strength, and that was Governor Joe Garrahy. He was the voice who quelled the anxiety, the fear, frankly, that this natural disaster would overwhelm us. In time of great turmoil, he was there. He assured us that help was on the way. And in what has become a famous historic relic in the state of Rhode Island, he did it all wearing the same plaid shirt, it seemed. That plaid shirt was a symbol of him. Nothing fancy. Something you could trust. Someone you could depend upon. Someone who rolled up his sleeves, literally, to get the job done for the people of Rhode Island. To literally, in some cases, through his leadership, save people in a very demanding natural disaster. He was, as I say again and again, one of the most decent individuals that I've ever met. He was so kind to me, so understanding, so tolerant. And I'm not alone. I recall something that was said about another great American, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was in his final procession. The cortege was going down Pennsylvania Avenue. There was an individual by the side of the road who was weeping, literally. And a reporter went up to him and said, well, you must have known the president. You're so convulsed. And he said, no, I didn't know him, never met him, but he knew me. Joe Garrahy knew the people of Rhode Island. He was a man of innate decency and goodness. He believed that every situation had some merit, a silver lining, something he could do to bring forth good out of bad, progress out of adversity. He was a man of deep faith who worked hard, remained optimistic and compassionate in any moment. He was a noble public servant, and that word is used often, but no more accurately than with respect to Joe Garrahy, a man of nobility, a nobility born not of privilege or wealth, but of character and conscience and concern. He had an extraordinary winning personality. He was one of those people you just wanted to bump into because he made you feel better. His warm, embracing personality, his humor, his friendliness, his caring, his sincerity, all those things transmitted this sense of knowing you and caring for you, which was unique and will never, I think, in my mind, be replicated by any of us in Rhode Island. Whenever you were with the governor, you always felt a little bit better about where you were, about the future, about the world. He was fond of people, and that fondness was repaid by a deep, deep sense of gratitude for what he's done and profound respect for a wonderful man. But above all this, he loved his family the most. He was a devoted husband and father, and as he was described by his grandchildren, their Poppy. And we remember him now, and we also remember his family, because they have lost a great man. But he did so much for all of us to make us bigger and better that we can withstand this great loss. I want to join with my fellow Rhode Islanders in offering my heartfelt sympathy to his loving wife, Marguerite, and his wonderful family, Colleen and Michael Mahoney, their children, Riley and Michaela, John and Barbara Cottam Garrahy and their daughters, Catherine and Elizabeth, Mary Beth and Robert Hardman and their son, Wesley, Sheila and Gregory Mitchell and their children, C.J., Tard, and Chad, and Sienna and Michael Edwards and their children, Drew, Braden, and Ellie Rose. We will miss him, but his legacy and his personal example of kindness and goodwill continue to sustain and inspire us. Today, we celebrate his life, and in the days and weeks and years to come, we will remember him fondly as one of Rhode Island's greatest governors. We are all the better for having Joe Garrahy in our biggest little state. With that, Mr. President, I would yield to my colleague.
Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I rise today to join my senior senator, Senator Reid, in tribute to the memory of a great public servant and a great friend, J. Joseph Garrahy, former governor of Rhode Island, who passed away last week at the age of 81. At his funeral services this week, he was remembered by an enormous crowd for his warmth, for his kindness, and for his steady leadership of our state. Joe Garrahy was born in Providence, Rhode Island, to a blue-collar Irish immigrant family. He worked his way through Catholic school, and he served in the Air National Guard and in the Air Force during the Korean War. He came back home from the war and went to work as a beer salesman for our Narragansett brewery. He was what they fittingly called a Narragansett goodwill man. And as Senator Reid has explained, Joe Garrahy brought goodwill wherever he went. He turned to politics and to public service with the 1960 presidential campaign of John F. Kennedy. Joe followed his path himself ultimately with election to the Rhode Island Senate. And then he was elected statewide as lieutenant governor, and then he served 2 terms as Rhode Island's governor, serving as chief of state in the very state house where his mother had once cleaned floors. It was a beautiful American success story for him to rise to lead the state house that his mother had cleaned. The story was told at his funeral that when he was lieutenant governor and she was still cleaning the state house, he said, "Mom, don't you want to, find something else to do now that I'm here as lieutenant governor?" And she turned to him and she said, "Joe, I got here first." In his public life, Joe Garrahy always made the effort to be what he once described as probably one of the easiest guys in the state of Rhode Island to get along with. He sure was. I don't think anyone who has worked with him over the years would disagree with that. Joe was certainly always very kind and supportive to me as I embarked on my fledgling career in public service. But Governor Garrahy's service to our state really stands as a guidepost for today's political leaders. He saw Rhode Island through the difficult economic recession of the early 1980s. He was a staunch defender of Narragansett Bay, our environmental jewel, and of Rhode Island's open spaces. His efforts to attract high-tech industries to Rhode Island and to advance our economy, his work on behalf of children and senior senators and senior citizens and those with disabilities all continue to inspire us. And of course, all Rhode Islanders who are old enough remember the blizzard of 1978, which buried parts of our state under 3 feet of snow and brought our roads and businesses to a shuddering halt. People spent days in factories, in movie theaters, in department stores where they were snowed in. I still recall the scene of cars up and down 95, covered in snow, abandoned, the road closed. Rhode Islanders are filled with stories of where they were and what they did during the great blizzard of '78 and how they struggled to get home to their loved ones. Through all of that, Governor Garrahy marshaled resources from the federal government and from neighboring states and got Rhode Island back on its feet. In his frequent televised messages to Rhode Islanders during the crisis, his plaid flannel shirt became a trademark of his accessible, hard-working, easygoing style. Governor Garrahy's right-hand man throughout his political career was Bill Dugan, his chief of staff. As fate would have it, we're also mourning the loss of Bill, who passed away just the day before we lost the governor. It was often said that Governor Garrahy didn't know how to say no. He was too nice for that. Well, that job often fell to Bill Dugan. Joe and Bill were lifelong friends, graduated in the same class at LaSalle Academy, went into politics together, and made a memorable political team in Rhode Island history. Last Thursday, Joe Garrahy and his dear companion and political associate, Bill Dugan, were together one last time. I spoke to Bill's sons are friends of mine, David and Richard, and at Bill's funeral I spoke to Richard, and I remarked on how extraordinary it was that this really exceptional Rhode Island friendship and political alliance should end with these two men dying in the same week within virtually hours of each other. And Richard looked back at me and he said, "Sheldon, you don't know the half of it. It was during my father's wake at Boyle's funeral home that the governor was brought home from Rhode Island, but from Florida, where he'd been vacationing, by the state police to Rhode Island. And that night, the two old companions rested one last time, side by side, on Smith Hill at Boyle's funeral home." On behalf of my wife, Sandra, and my family, I extend to the Garrahy family our deepest condolences. To Joe's loving wife, Marguerite, to their children, Colleen, John, Mary Beth, Sheila, Shauna, and their 11 grandchildren and the entire Garrahy family, we have you in our hearts. Joe Garrahy often spoke about the great joy his children and his 11 grandchildren gave him, especially in the years after his retirement. Our thoughts and prayers are with them all today. I am very pleased to have this opportunity to join with Senator Reid and with so many Rhode Islanders who are still remembering, thinking of, praying for, and giving homage to Governor Garrahy. We will never forget his ready smile, his easy friendship, his distinguished service, his ability to remember every name, and his long and very loving marriage. I join Senator Reid in saluting his legendary service to our state, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to give folks, I know they're riveted to their televisions, so I wanted to give them an update as to where we're at on the Stock Act. First of all, there's been a lot of good amendments back and forth. We've reviewed them. We've been working, obviously, late into last night and working today, throughout the day, gearing up for votes that I'm hopeful will be forthcoming. If not today, then hopefully tomorrow. But I do appreciate the process, and I wanted to publicly thank Leader Reid for his willingness to allow us to work through this process, because it is sensitive for some people, and it is new territory for others. But I will say, being the first time having the ability to come down and co-manage the floor with Senator Collins and work with Senator Lieberman and Senator Gillibrand, the process has been open and fair. We're trying now to kind of eliminate some of the amendments that may not be relevant, where we've had some folks step back and say, yes, take this off or take that off, and that's a good thing. And we've been trying to combine other amendments to try to obviously solidify where we want to go with this thing. But I did want to let folks know that we are working diligently with both staffs of all the concerned members, and hopefully we will get some votes very shortly. But once again, I do want to commend Leader Reid and his staff, and obviously the chairman and his staff, and Senator Gillibrand, and obviously Senator Collins, for everyone working together, trying to make this happen. So I appreciate that, and I just wanted to make that reference for folks who are paying attention, and I doubt the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator Scott Brown of Massachusetts, one of the bill managers on the Stock Act, saying that they're working on pulling together possible votes that could happen either today or tomorrow. The Stock Act is a bill that would bar lawmakers and their staffs from insider trading. The Associated Press writes that the nation's leading breast cancer charity, Susan G. Komen for the Cure, is halting its partnership with Planned Parenthood affiliates. Komen spokeswoman Leslie Ann says the cutoff results from the charity's newly adopted criteria barring grants to organizations that are under investigation by local, state, or federal authorities. According to Komen, this applies to Planned Parenthood because it's the focus of an inquiry launched by Representative Cliff Stearns, the Republican from Florida, seeking to determine whether public money was improperly spent on abortions. Two Democrats in Congress, Senator Patty Murray of Washington and Representative Michael Honda of California, issued statements denouncing Komen's action. That from the Associated Press. We've been seeing a few tweets from members of Congress about Attorney General Eric Holder and the Fast and Furious investigation. The Huffington Post reports that the Justice Department is rejecting an assertion by a House committee chairman that top justice officials are covering up events surrounding a flawed gun smuggling probe, Operation Fast and Furious. Representative Darrell Issa made the accusation in a letter threatening to pursue contempt proceedings against Attorney General Eric Holder for failing to turn over congressionally subpoenaed documents that were created after problems with Fast and Furious came to light. Deputy Attorney General James Cole responded today that the department will provide material created after February 4, 2011, the day the department gave incorrect information to Congress about Fast and Furious. Attorney General Eric Holder will testify before the House Oversight Committee tomorrow morning. We're going to have live coverage on that on cspan.org. Debate here in the Senate continues on a bill aiming to stop insider trading by members of Congress and their staffs, and more work on the measure is expected tomorrow. We see there on the lower left of your screen some senators talking, including Senators Brown, Lieberman, and Carper. Senators Brown and Lieberman are the bill managers for this STOCK Act. Tomorrow morning, President Obama participates in the 60th Annual National Prayer Breakfast. The president is expected to speak at about 8 a.m. Eastern, and we're going to have it live for you here on C-SPAN 2. Also tomorrow, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke is scheduled to talk about the economy before the House Budget Committee. You can watch that live starting at 10 a.m. Eastern over on C-SPAN 3. There's an article in Congressional Quarterly that gives an update on where things stand here in the Senate. With the Senate debate on insider trading bogged down by a tussle over the massive pending amendments, two House Democrats are challenging their chamber's GOP majority to act swiftly to put the bill on the floor. Louise Slaughter of New York and Tim Walz of Minnesota announced today that they're filing a discharge petition to bypass the committee process and bring their version of the legislation, known as the Stock Act, to the House floor. The bill would ban lawmakers and aides from trading stocks and other securities based on non-public information. Discharge petitions are seldom successful because they require the signatures of a majority of the full House. Slaughter and Walz, however, believe they have a chance because their bill already has 271 co-sponsors, well more than half of the chamber. That's an update on what's happening with the Stock Act.
Thank you.